Hi everyone, this is Mary with Big Plaid Wolf, and I'm here with another card tutorial for you today. I'm going to start with a piece of Bristol Smooth cardstock that I have cut to 5 inches by 3 3/4 inches, so it's just a little bit smaller than a standard size card. I'm going to be doing some ink blending, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some of this medical tape that I have a bunch of, and I'm going to use it to tape it down to my work surface and as a mask. So here I just want to adjust it a little bit so it's more in the center of my screen, and then I'm going to finish taping off the edges so that I have a rectangle in the center of my card front. You can do this with any sort of shape that has straight lines. It doesn't just have to be squares or rectangles. You can mask off a triangle. If you get really fancy, you could even mask off a star. But there are plenty of stencils that are also on the market that could do this for you. I just don't happen to have any, and I have an overabundance of this medical tape, so this is what worked for me. Also, if you have any dies that will cut out certain shapes, you can use those and cut them out of paper and then use that paper as a stencil for your card front. I'm just going to go ahead and speed things up here so that we can get this done and move on to the rest of the card. Now that I've got this whole area masked off, I'm going to go ahead and grab some of my Distress Oxide inks, all in shades of blue. And these are the 3 colors that I want to use for my ink blending. I've got some Tumbled Glass, some Mermaid Lagoon, and some Blueprint Sketch Distress Oxide inks, and I'm going to scooch them off to the side while I get started with the Tumbled Glass. I like to start with my lightest color, so I'm going to go in with this blending brush from the Stamp Market, and start just blending all over the background of my masked off square. Ink blending is one of my favorite techniques for cards, and I use it as often as I can. I think it's one of the best ways to get an interesting or unique background for projects. So I'm just going to go ahead and grab that Mermaid Lagoon, and I'm going to start blending it in. I like to try to avoid harsh lines by doing these circles, but if you get any, it's totally fine. You can just pretty much keep blending it out. Distress Oxide inks are super blendable, and if you just keep working them a little, the colors will soften and blend together if you put a little work into it. I'm trying to concentrate the darker color up towards the top and then have it fade down to the lighter color at the bottom so that I can just have a little bit of variance in my blending. As I wrap up the ink blending, I like to use whatever ink is left on my brush to just sort of smooth things over as a whole, and so I just go over it one final time before wrapping things up. Once I clear away all of my distress inks, I'm going to grab my newest acquisition, which is a little bottle of Copic Opaque White ink. I want to use this as a little bit of an added interest on the background of my ink blending, and so I'm going to take a very dirty acrylic block and smudge a little bit of this onto it. It's a non-porous surface, so it won't absorb it at all. And after that, I'm going to go ahead and get some water from a cup off screen and add it to thin it out so it's a little more workable. I've also grabbed a watercolor paintbrush that I use, and that's what I'm using to add the water, and then I'm going to thin it out just enough so that it can splatter nicely in the background without losing its opacity. Before doing this, you might want to mask off the rest of your work surface just so that you don't get ink splatters like I did. It wiped up very quickly and easily afterwards, so I wasn't too concerned. Basically what I'm doing is I'm going to pick up some of the ink on my brush and then tap on the back of the brush to splatter it across the whole thing. It takes a little while to get the look that I was going for, but I wanted some variance in the size and for it to just add something to the background. Now that I've finished that, I'm just going to wipe down my work surface a little bit so that it doesn't dry, and I'm going to clean up my acrylic block as well, and then we get to the fun part, which is peeling up all this tape. Now that that's all done, I've got this wonderful rectangle filled with color that has nice crisp lines that I can now use as a base for some cute images. So I've got this little bowl right off screen that I'm going to bring in. That's got a few of the little images that I want to use for the card. I've got a sloth and 2 leaves from Lawn Fawn, and I'm going to start by coloring in my sloth. Now, I'm no expert at coloring by any means, but I have been practicing with these Uhu art markers, which are brush nib and chisel nib alcohol ink markers, much like Copics are, but at a much cheaper price point, which is perfect for me as an inexperienced colorer. And I wanted to give these a try, so I grabbed the 72 pack a little while ago, and I have been really liking them. I just grabbed some warm grays and some browns for the twig that the sloth is hanging on. Like I said, I'm no expert at coloring, but I'm just going to try to have some fun with this, and so I'm going to put shadows where I think there should be shadows, lighter fur where I think there should be lighter fur, and that's about it. So I'm going to start with my warm grays. I'm going to put on some music for you guys just to listen to while I color, and I'll speed things up. So I finished up coloring in my cute little sloth, and now I'm going to take these 2 leaves and I'm going to color them in with these GY markers and add them to the twig. So I'm going to go ahead and turn the music back on and let you guys watch that. So after this, I've actually gone ahead and already colored the other green leaf off camera because it was done the exact same way. And I also added a few little speckles of the Copic Opaque White as well, just add a little bit more interest and have things match with the background. Here is my finished sloth. I added a little bit of texture with some stippling and some dots at the deeper colors of his fur, just to add a little bit of texture. And now I'm gonna start putting everything all together. I want to sort of check where I want to place everything, so I'm going to be laying the sloth and the 2 leaves down on the now dry background. There's no more wet ink on it. And I'm just going to keep picking up and putting down the leaves and deciding where I want them to eventually end up on my finished card. Once I've found the layout that I'm happiest with, I'm going to go ahead and start adhering everything to my actual card. So I'm going to take some Tombow adhesive with this tape runner, and I'm going to just put some tape on the back of my sloth here, and I'm going to put him down first before I try to put the leaves on. Once I got the sloth unstuck from my fingers, I finally was able to put the image onto the thing. I just scooched those leaves out of the way, knowing where I want to put them eventually, and I gently pressed down to seal the adhesive. I'm then going to take the first of the 2 leaves, and I'm going to use that same Tombow adhesive that I used for the sloth, and I'm going to just put a little bit on the back of the leaf and flip that over and get it stuck onto my paper. I didn't immediately press down on it, and so I was able to have a little bit of wiggle room for where I wanted to place it before firmly pressing and sealing in that adhesive. I wanted to give my card just a little bit of dimension, so I'm grabbing this Scotch foam tape that I'm going to put on the back of my second leaf, and I'm going to pop that up just a little bit higher than the other leaf and my sloths to add that little hint of dimension onto my card. So now we've got our background, the sloth, and the leaves, and now it's just time for a sentiment. So I'm going to actually go grab my handy dandy little triangle dish full of sentiments. These are pre-stamped and they're from Mama Elephant. I stamped them in all sorts of fun colors a little while ago and cut them all out by hand. They're rectangular, so it was super easy with a combination of my paper trimmer and a pair of scissors. I'm just going to start searching through these and I'll cut out the long portion for you and eventually find 2 that I thought went nicely with the colors of mine and the sentiment that I was going for. I eventually settled on these 2 sentiment strips. I think that there's a perfect amount of space for 2 sentiments right here, and they go together. I think the green thank you and the light blue big hugs match the color scheme and the theme of my card nicely. I think the sloth is a perfect image to convey big hugs, and I wanted to make another thank you card for my card stash, and so now I'm just going to go ahead and attach these to my card. I'm ripping up some of those same foam tape pieces from earlier. I did not have a pair of scissors with me, and so I was doing this by hand, so it's a little bit choppy, but the great thing about this Scotch tape is that you can rip it by hand, and so even though I didn't have my scissors nearby, I was able to make something work just by tearing it up with my fingers, and I do the same with the big hug sentiment. I'm just going to finish lining up and foam taping this final sentiment onto my card, and then I'm going to have a completed card front. And here's what it all looks like with our nice bright blue ink blending, our colorful leaves and sentiments, and then our cute little sloth. I am now going to fold up a card base that I've got pre-cut and scored, and at first I wanted to test to see if the white cardstock looked nice just against a white background, but I decided that it could use one more pop of color to tie everything all together. So I grabbed my paper trimmer and a piece of light blue cardstock, and I trimmed it down to 1/4 inch larger than what I was working with, and so that way it would have 1/8 of an inch on each side to make a nice tiny sliver of a colorful mat for my card. After making sure everything lined up nicely, I took that same Tombow tape runner adhesive and I put it all over the back of that card front piece and then attached it centered to the light blue cardstock. I pressed down to make sure everything was firmly adhered, and then once I was finished with that, I flipped it over so that I could add some more adhesive to the other side and get it set for my card base. I just added a bunch more tape all over the back of this. I was having a little bit of issue with my tape runner, but it's nothing that some off-screen magic can't fix. And then I lined it up on my card base just like this, And I've got a nice little strip of color all the way around my card front to tie everything together. I like to flip my card over to push from the back just so I don't smush things quite as much, and that's it. This is my finished card, and I hope that I can give it to someone and make them smile. Thank you all so much for watching my video. Here's one final look at the finished card. I've been really happy to make these YouTube videos, and I would love if you guys joined me on my YouTube journey. You can subscribe to my channel here, and if you'd like, you can even follow along on Instagram where I post more card making and digital art content. Thank you so much.